being very clear about your purpose. Why are you doing this work? Know the human impact of your work, know the business impact of your work. And I think if you can answer that, then the pitch is so much more successful because you're connecting it back to the goals of the event organizer, whatever their theme is, and all of it just starts to knit together in, this kind of beautiful line of opportunities that you can create from that.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Keynote Curators podcast. I'm Seth Dechtman, your Keynote Curator. I am thrilled to have our next guest share her insights. Kara Dickerson, welcome to our podcast.
Hi, Seth. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
You are very welcome. Where does today's podcast find you, Kara?
It finds me in my home office in Alexandria, Virginia. So East Coast outside of Washington, D.C.
In the heart of the nation's capital.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you for being with us. Kara, I just want to share a little bit with the audience. They probably know of you or about you or organizations that you've been involved with, but let me just dial in a little bit to exactly where we can get the precise best information about you. So you are the founder of Content with Impact, a consultancy that advises global brands and event organizers on securing high-impact speaking placements and developing content and event strategy that amplify an event's brand and revenue. In Kara's last corporate role, she was the head of content for the world-renowned, global branded Consumer Technology Association, which is the owner of CES, the world's most influential technology event. Her team was responsible for the content strategy, production, and logistics for the CES conference and keynote stage, as well as CTA's annual portfolio of global events. After a 20-plus year career in tech, in 2023, Kara started her own consultancy, allowing her to bring years of content and event experience to helping her clients make the most of their event content strategy and have the biggest impact. That's why Kara's consultancy is called Content with Impact. So I just want to dive right into it, Kara. What had you transition? Walk us through that story of the transition from there to, being this content and brand executive to opening up your own consultancy.
So, well, first of all, Seth, if I could get you to record that intro and to give my bio every time, I would be thrilled because it was beautifully done. Thank you for that. So, in thinking about why I made the choice, I actually think it's kind of fun to think back on where I was. I've been doing a lot of introspection as I made the transition into owning my own shop and helping my clients. And, when I think even back to the early days of the work that I was doing before I was in events, I was a communications and PR professional. So, I did everything from, help in Al Gore's communications office during the 1996 election to pitching members of the media on, communications campaigns as part of a K Street, firm focused on political and, product campaigns in my early days. I was a national spokesperson for a trade association and was very well versed in the beginning of my career in telling stories and really understanding why content was so important to make a big impact for whatever organization that you were working in. And so when I, started my career, I've done everything in events from being the person who has the pop-up trade show booth in their carry-on luggage and has to pick it up from the luggage carousel in the early days and drag it, in a cab to a trade show floor and be a one-person exhibitor, which I did many times in my early days, to, helping to create the strategy for one of the largest, kind of global shows on earth. So it's been a lot of fun to think about all of those different pieces of that journey. But, when I was at CTA and, part of creating, what is so amazing with CES, we were able to really help shape the future. And, that was the part that was so exciting. And my team at CTA not only helped to produce the content, the production, the AV, the logistics for our annual portfolio of events year round, which we took to Europe, Asia, the Middle East. We were all over the world, but we also were kind of on the front lines of innovation at CES every year. And one of the exciting things about working in the technology industry in particular, which kept it so compelling for so many of us that were in that space for so long, is that it never stands still. The future is today, is tomorrow. There is always something different. It is a industry that is ripe with change every second. And so we had to stay very, very innovative and constantly thinking ahead. So as you were getting ready to produce, the upcoming show, you had to be thinking, 2 years out, where is technology going to go? How do we pivot to be able to encompass that with very little planning time to actually pull it off? So I wore a number of hats at CTA over the years, from the events role where I spent the second half of my career there, to managing boards and creating strategy and creating new revenue opportunities. And it was all of that lived experience in event and strategy creation that got me really excited to think about the next chapter for me, which was going out on my own and, taking that experience and being able to help my clients really think creatively and with a big picture view about all of the ways that their event content strategy, whether it's for a global brand or a private event company or a large trade show, how much that can really impact their goals, their ability to connect with their communities and drive, a really significant change.
Thank you. That was very thorough, and I enjoyed tracking the whole thing. A couple things to unpack. First of all, very few of our guests have an origin story that starts on K Street in Washington, D.C. So I think we made history there. And for the younger listeners, a cab is what existed before Uber. So
Exactly.
if you want to use the World Wide Web, otherwise known as the internet, you can Google or use your chat bot and find out what a cab is. And you can, do a little bit of research and get informed about ancient history. But, it's incredible to me. The journey has brought you to where you are now, where you're still deploying, providing, and serving clients, perhaps from a different position, a different organization, now your own business, but really the same skill set, maybe from a different angle, maybe a little bit more tailored, maybe a little bit more veteran, if you will, very precise, very specific. What is it that had you, I want to get into the content of your content that you provide as a service, but do you think that the pandemic had anything to do on the sum of the course of your jobs to have you decide to go on your own, or was it more of a timing thing? Or, how does that all play into it? Because this is a big choice. This isn't like you wake up and I'm going to leave and start something right away.
Right. No, I think there was a bunch of different factors that influenced that. And certainly I would say the innovation and the disruption and kind of the combination of those two things that the events industry went through during the pandemic was, of course, exhausting for everyone. And there's certainly, I think, a big impact on the industry that it had. But it also, I think, forced a really significant level of creativity and outside of the box thinking, and a realization, I think, of the real value of the connectivity in the community that events can create. And so it's something I had been thinking about for some time. And, as we came out of that and events were really, I think, on the rise in terms of the importance back to our all industries and all communities, it felt like the right time for me to take this leap and be able to just provide the experience that I had. But also on a personal front, and I think this is really important for people to talk about, my kids were growing up I had a son who was graduating from high school and heading off to college, and my daughter was entering high school. And it was a really good time for me personally to also say, how can I build some flexibility and, kind of a different schedule into my life and be able to do different types of projects, but also be able to focus on some of the, kind of the fleeting family years. As everybody who has kids know, they grow up really fast. So those two things came together and at the perfect time for me.
I think it should be underscored the courage and the valor that it takes to do this, because most meeting professionals are well equipped and have a wide ranging skill set. Some may be stronger than others, but like you said, they can get in a cab with the booth folded up in some checked in luggage, or doing very complex displays and catering and food and beverage and offsite and security and keynotes and dress rehearsals and lighting and sound and everything else that goes into putting on a fantastic meeting. But to then take that on your own, which any meeting professional is equipped with those skills can do, is a big jump. It's a leap of faith and confidence in yourself. And on top of that, have the awareness to say, wait, life moves fast, quoting Ferris Bueller now. Life moves fast. And, here's an opportunity, but it takes some cojones to stand up on your own and look the world in the eye and say, I'm going to do this on my own. So I just applaud you. I want to underline that for our listeners. This is a courageous move. I don't want to over dramatize it, but it shouldn't be just passed through like, oh yeah, I left my job because of this and the timing and the innovations and the creativity required, and boom, it's a big deal. And I just acknowledge you for doing that. It's really awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So, you now find yourself, you're the founder, you took the leap, you're designing a new life, a new schedule, you have different commitments, you're being pulled in different directions. How does content with impact, your organization, your company, help global brands and event organizers kind of amplify, boost, increase that awareness and drive the revenue, increase the money coming through for high impact speaking placements and purpose driven programming? Can you talk about the work that you do with your clientele?
I can. So, one of the things that I can say, and it was again interesting to take a look back over the time that I've spent in the events industry, is when you've spent so many years curating event content at such a scale, whether it be large or small, but as often as I have, I tried to calculate some numbers for myself. I was like, how can I bring this down into something that I can quantify? And I tried to calculate actually the number of speaker pitches that I've heard over the years. And that was impossible, but I'm guessing it was probably somewhere in the thousands, as have you, Seth. I mean, this is your bread and butter. This is what you live and breathe. And hearing all of those pitches, kind of being on the other side of them, and also giving them very much, it was a two-way street. When there's someone that you really want to bring in and engage with your event because you just know they're going to be the perfect fit for your audience, you have to really hone your storytelling capabilities personally, but you also have really good radar for what is going to resonate and who's prepared and who's ready to tell their story. So I wanted to take that experience, and I wanted to take the experience that I had in creating communities and bringing in new industries. And we were talking earlier about, CES was always trying to do something new because tech was moving at such a fast pace. We were very actively engaging non-traditional, non-technology audiences in our events. So the automotive industry, the healthcare industry, retail, beauty, you name it. Energy, smart home, there is a tech component in all of those. Agriculture, food tech, advertising and marketing, content and entertainment. We could go on, right? There's probably not an industry that isn't enabled by and touched by technology. And that allowed me to create a really deep network of chief communications officers and CMOs and the gatekeepers of, of brand and reputation. And so my client work, I would say, is focused in three kind of core areas right now. So I'm helping clients develop future forward event content strategy so they can think about how to keep their events always at the forefront. What are the types of speakers and what's the type of education that'll really help their attendees, whoever they are. They could be, professionals that in a manufacturing industry, they could be, marketers who are really looking to continue to grow their skills, or it could be a massive global brand, continue to stay at the cutting edge and always looking ahead to the future. So we talk about ways that we can launch new conference products, new stages, new sponsorship opportunities, but really all grounded in content and taking that experience that I had from CES and doing that so successfully. So I've worked with trade associations, I've worked with private event companies, I've worked with agencies, helping them think through those opportunities. And then I am also, of course, with the insider's perspective on CES, I'm helping to advise companies that are really thinking about how to leverage a platform like that, whether it's CES or a large global platform, to really have the biggest impact. How can they combine their storytelling with perhaps an activation or a media opportunity to really cut through the noise and be seen and be heard? It's one of the hardest things to do.
There's a lot of noise.
There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise. And you have to be very thoughtful and purposeful in terms of how you do that. And then the third, I'd say the third pillar is actually mentoring and coaching event teams and content staff. There's been a lot of change over the last couple of years in the industry. There's a lot of new people in the industry who could benefit and are benefiting from coaching and mentoring to continue to grow their career. So that's been one of the most rewarding and unexpected opportunities for me.
Those three areas, thus with impact, right? It's all with impact.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a word that I've come across a lot. You hear names and titles of the meetings, Engage, Summit, on and on, right? I'm hearing impact a lot. And I've always felt that in the curation process, and you mentioned the word curate, and it's what you've been doing for 15 plus 20 years, even all the way back to K Street, how can what I'm providing as the keynote curator make a lasting impact? Because it's not just a proposal and a speaker that gets selected. It's how can I impact your choice process? How can I impact you becoming aware of speakers, maybe not for this immediate event that we're looking at, but one in the future or one down the line where I'm planting a seed. And I think that, as you said, as you're deploying and executing an event, you're thinking a year or 2 years down the road. That's what the curation process is. So what are your event teams and what are your meeting professionals doing to continue to keep your eye on that type of content that has an impact?
So I think there's so many different ways to do that, right? And it's not very easy. It's hard to keep your head up and look farther out when you are in the midst of executing. Yeah. And that, I think, is the least understood superpower, I think, of event professionals, is that they're not only producing and, managing what's right in front of them, they're also looking at the horizon all the time. So you need
That's right.
this set of progressive glasses, right? You're looking up and down all the time. I think that what's so important is having just a really innate curiosity and always be researching and thinking and reading and paying attention. And one of the best ways that I think that event professionals can continue to keep that mindset, for themselves is to really be connecting the work that they're doing with the larger objectives and goals of the company or the event, whoever they're working for. I think it can be very easy to have our blinders on and just say, I have to get through the next 3 weeks because I have to produce this event. And here's my list of the 1,000 things that I have to do and all the things that could go wrong. And I've got a plan for all of those. But when you're able to combine that with the ability to say, well, let's always remember we're producing this so we can connect our community with new business, or
That's right.
so we can really elevate an industry and help them, gain awareness or new opportunities. Whatever the purpose is, really needs to stay at the forefront of the work that you're doing. And I think for you as the keynote curator, as you're working with your clients, you really strike me as someone who builds those deep relationships with them to understand what their big audacious goals are. What are they looking to accomplish? And even if that's a couple years out or a couple of events out, you're then able to keep in mind opportunities that might really connect and work for them. So it's that combination of the right in front of you and looking out, but really connecting your work with why the event is happening in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, it is a fine line, right? It's a balance. You have the 1,000 things with everything as a backup plan, and you have to keep, your fourth or fifth eyeball down the road on the future, and that impact, which I like to say, it's a lasting impact. You can have an immediate and lasting impact, whatever that content that you're providing, whether it's the mentoring you're doing, whether it's providing vendors on how to leverage or be heard among the noise, whatever it is that you're doing, how can you have it be immediate and then have that durability, that duration? And it requires that fine line between being here and keeping an eyeball on the future. And there's not one way to do it, Kara. I think that, like you said, research, talk to people. I mean, that's the biggest, richest piece of map, if you will, North Star cartography to look to the future. You just talk about, I've been trained and told, ask people what's exciting that they're working on, and you can kind of begin to get a roadmap of the future because people want to talk about what's exciting them that they're working on. The idea that, whether it was with the CES show or what you're doing now with your clientele, creating that future from nothing, saying, okay, what's going to work here for this client is really, I think, the art of the curation process. I want to ask you about storytelling and the future and the curation process and being heard among the noise. Everybody has their take on storytelling. You hear storytelling this and storytelling's important and storytelling for a brand, or you have to have storytelling to get your point across. And I think that there is no one way to skin a cat there, right? Is that the phrase, skin a cat?
We'll just throw all the antiquated phrases out there.
I'm just going to throw them all out there. But what is your take, Kara? Because you've dealt with the biggest stage, at least in the trade consumer show, electronic show in the world. I mean, it's a global brand. It's hundreds of countries represented, dozens of languages. What was your Kara's specific dial in on how you wanted to tell a story, or did you have a certain approach or methodology or a structure, or how you get grounded in doing that?
So, it's an interesting question because it was different. I would say it's different every year, right? It's not a process that stays static. It's something that has to grow and evolve. And I think that really comes back to what we just talked about before, which is staying very connected with your community, whoever that community is. With CES in particular, it's owned and produced by the Consumer Technology Association. It's a trade association with more than 2,000 members that, outside of the 4 days in Las Vegas, has a very vibrant community that was always engaging, always sharing challenges and opportunities. And so the work that was done outside of the show was very much focused on that community. What can we do to help them gain new business, to help people understand the benefits of the technologies that were being developed? And I think when you have that connection, you're able to work with them to hear what they need.
Yeah.
You're able to bring in information from all different parts of your organization or your community to help develop that content plan. I can give you an example actually that's outside of CES.
Bring it on.
I know it's fun to talk about, but one of the things that my team curated every year was a C-level, very intimate summit for about 150 top technology executives. And we would take this all over the world. We produced it in Prague, we produced it in Tel Aviv, we produced it in Paris and Shanghai. And what we needed to think about with that audience is maybe they actually don't need the top tech trends because they were actually creating those tech trends. They were part of the companies that were creating technology's future, but they were business leaders and they needed to understand how, what were some of the changing kind of macro trends that they needed to be thinking about as part of their own business. How could they step away from their work and come back as better leaders into their own communities? And so, we had to put a different hat on for that event because we had to think about if I'm a C-level executive at a large company or a small company, what are my challenges as a leader in my organization? And we created different content for that. And we brought in the global, the part of the world that we were in to really integrate and connect those two pieces. So I think it's customized. It depends on the situation, but you have to stay connected to your community.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an evolving process. There isn't, follow step 1 through 6, and there's a structure. I think there might be some core virtues, which you talked about: curious, have your eyes open, and it just makes perfect sense as you're telling this story. Is that, hey, I'm just going to name the names because you might want to protect the innocent. But if it's Cisco, Intel, IBM, whatever these. Really, the people that literally are creating the future with technology, they want to learn how to navigate, I don't know if the word is chaos, but what are the macro challenges? What are the bigger picture ideas that are beyond a literal piece of technology, a software, a firmware, a hardware, some type of innovation that's going on within their industry? That how do they encompass the leadership and how to deal with, the workforce that might be changing based on region or education or whatever's going on? So, that story to say, hey, I think we need to do this for our executives that are part of this trade association, that are active members, highly engaged, and are looking to us to give them nutrition, if you will, give them a provocation, something that they can walk away with, that they've been in a healthy way poked and prodded to have some curiosity to think about these kind of things. And storytelling is an important aspect of that, not just at the conference, whether it's Tel Aviv, Prague, or San Francisco, but really how to internally you get that idea through as this is what we're going to provide for them. And then how do you execute what you're going to provide for them? And all of that is storytelling, I think. Tell me where I'm wrong on that.
No, totally. I mean, it's all connected. And, my team, we had a mission statement that we kind of created together, and it was, and I'm paraphrasing because I probably have it wrong at this point, but, it was essentially, let's create exceptional event experiences that educate, connect, and inspire. And whatever interpretation of that, whatever version of that it was, depending on the event and what we were trying to accomplish, we always kept that in mind as we were pulling together that plan.
Yeah, and it's connected to often groups that I work with, whether they're trade associations, corporations, all sizes, all industries. You get a directive or a general push, let's say a loving push from an executive who says, this is what our focus is. I saw this astronaut, or I saw this Olympian, or this athlete, or this author's book might fit. But if you stop and just don't blindly take the initiative and you look at the big picture, what's the mood of the industry? What's the mood of this particular organization? Where have we come from? Where are we headed? Not fear of missing out. What are the competitors doing? But what's kind of the texture that's going on, the energy, what volume of activity is going on? And then does that make sense to begin to pursue content, in this case, a keynote speaker, based on what an initiative? And it might be that executive, that CEO, that chief operations officer, chief marketing officer just innately is on the pulse, but often it's not. And then how do you tell that story internally to them? And then, Kara, you have a habitual event, whether it's annual, semi-annual, every other year, where your attendees are accustomed or have been conditioned and trained for a certain thing. And then have you seen the challenge where you deviate away from a big name or somebody that's connected to a big brand or what's hot for the moment? That's a challenge.
It is a challenge. But I think if you are really grounded in what you are looking to create, the experience you're looking to create, the takeaway that you want your attendees to have, that you can find ways to create the flexibility that you need within your agenda, to whether it's to accommodate a speaker that you need to, or to just shift the way the content is structured. But I think the advice that I would give, and all of us fall into this at some point or the other, which is we tend to want to repeat what was done before because we know how to do it. We don't have enough time to do something totally different. We're under-resourced or understaffed, don't have enough money, whatever the constraints
and we've had a general level of success, based on surveys or
right. What isn't broken, don't fix it. Right.
Sure.
Like there's that mentality. And I think that can get you pretty far. But I would certainly encourage everyone who is thinking about their event strategy to always be trying to incorporate, even if it's just a small percent. If 80% of what you do is the same from year to year, but 20% is different, that gives you a chance to experiment. It gives you a chance to try something new. It gives you a chance to market your event differently, and also to really get good feedback from your community about what they liked or didn't like about that. And then you can maybe expand on that in the future. But I think it's an important thing to keep in mind.
Well, one of the things, I don't know if I struggle with it, but I have my attention on it, is I have very strong personal tastes, whether it's what I eat, wear, put on my wall, put on my feet. I have a personal aesthetic. Sometimes it's more of function. Sometimes it's a little bit more design. Sometimes it's whatever part of the dial of the two together, and other elements that I'm probably just not even aware of that come into play. So when I'm curating, I need to put my aesthetic, my tastes aside, and completely become an empty vessel and channel my client, my buyer, the organization that I'm collaborating with, partnering with, to get into their world, what works for them. Because my aesthetic aside, it doesn't matter. And then taking your organization, impact, content with impact, and then, and this is where the question, or I want your insight on this, is, post-pandemic, the industry, things are more commoditized. People are more informed. People are more exposed. It's hard to have their attention. There's chaos. There's swirl. How do you stop the scroll? How do you be heard when nobody's listening? And here we are tasked with bringing in strategic content that's planned, that's going to speak to attendees and move the messaging, the initiatives, and the core values. And this is what I want you to talk about forward, so that the through line extends to the future. Not only because it would be nice, hey, I wonder where it is next year and who they're going to bring in next year, but really, wow, I'm walking away, I'm inhabiting a whole body of content that's going to have an immediate impact. There's the comment again, impact. So how do you, Kara, dial in, and how do you get in touch with values of the team that's producing, and then the attendees that they're directing the production towards, at, and for? And how do you align all that?
I love that question, because it's not always easy to do. I think one of the really interesting parts of working with so many different types of organizations, and Seth, this is an experience that you share. You've done way more of it than I have, so I'm sure you have amazing instincts on this, would be to really ask questions. What I'm finding quite often is that when you start the dialogue with a new client and they're really thinking, they have a sense of where they want to take this. I think I want to do this, or We have something written on the back of a napkin, kind of a sketch.
Sure.
But when you really start asking questions about what are those big audacious goals that you have, what would be your ideal scenario? What's the best case outcome for doing this work? What are the biggest challenges? What stopped you from doing it before? Or what's what's been an obstacle in the path previously, whether it's budget or staff or lack of marketing support or whatever it might be? I think the more you really ask those questions, the more you can be targeted in helping to develop a strategy that's going to really help them meet their goals. And I have a very simple exercise that I do with my clients. I used to do it with potential keynoters or potential speakers when I was working for CES or any of the events that we were producing. One of the questions I would always ask someone is, if you could write your ideal headline from this experience, you as a keynoter, you as an organization creating an event, whoever you are, if you could write your ideal headline, what would it say? And most of the time, people don't have an immediate answer to that question.
I could see that.
Right? You have to think about it.
Yeah.
But thinking about it allows you to really actually hone in on what is most important and allows you to prioritize rather than trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink into, kind of what you're doing. And that's always a fun exercise because it does allow us to really think more purposefully about what we want to accomplish. So if that's a small tip that's helpful, I think it's worthwhile.
I think that's fantastic because the inquiry itself is a vehicle to what it is you want to deliver, what it is you want people to have, to feel, to touch, to be able to take away. And it's a simple question, but it requires time and effort. And I'm not going to say it's complex, but it takes something to answer that question. I'm not surprised that people aren't spewing it out. There might be the outlier who know right away. It's also an insight based on what answers you get on where their mind is,
Right. And how much work they might still need to do, or we need to do together, right?
Right.
Like, let's do this together. Let's see if we can get ourselves to that answer.
100%. And that brings me back to, and I'm talking about speakers now specifically, because while there might be big names, what ends up the audience to answer your question is the headline might be, it's all about the personality. So they're left with, that person was amazing.
Right.
That might be the headline. I'm metaphorically speaking, right? As opposed to, they're amazing, no doubt. But what can we kind of excavate, pull out of that story that applies to you? And then how can you take it away and make an impact in your life, in your home, in your work, or both, right? Yeah.
Totally. What did that person teach me? What am I bringing back with me?
That's right.
How did that inspire me to do something, to change, to action, whatever it may be? And you want to connect that positive feeling with the community in the event where you gained that insight. And that means a lot when you can get that right.
I'm thinking, what can that person teach me? I also think that, attendees are smart. And while many are spoon-fed, I think that they also, part of the deal is, and I love when a speaker, I don't know if the word is challenge, but like, I'm not here to just wash you over with a bunch of words. Like, come here. What are you grappling with? What are you working on? Like you said, what are the challenges? And locate your mind while we're sharing this presentation, while what I prepared for you, I've done my research, I've interviewed, and I'm not going to be talking about, baking a cake if you're dealing with something in your industry very specific, and how can you listen from that place of commitment where something might not be working as well as you want it to. And then what I have to offer can address that. And then it's up to you to take it away. I love when there's that request or put yourself on the hook, so to speak.
Definitely. And I think that speaks to the relationship building that's so important, right? Whoever you're working with, if someone is working with you to really get that perfect speaker for their event, or they're working with me to kind of think about that future forward content strategy, you have to build the trust and you have to do the work, have to do the research and put some thought into it ahead of time. But the more that relationship develops, that outcome is just going to continue to get better.
Yeah. Pilots call it hours in the air, right?
Right.
Like, it's just time. And what I try to do in a highly competitive world, and I know event production, event planning, event strategy, content with impact is competitive. Is to see that get in my client's world so that I'm not just doing a Groundhog Day. Oh, it's January, the event's in June. Let's get the committee together. How much? What's the theme? Boom, here's your list. It's like if I have a great idea, or what I think is a great idea, if I have an idea in June or July and the event happened 3 weeks ago, I'm not pestering, but I'm like, you know what? Based on where I know your organization is going, the conversations we had, I follow you all, whether it's on social or in the news, this is something to consider. Would you like to learn a little bit more about it? And that's where it's not Groundhog Day or a broken record, right?
Right.
And it becomes like a cookie cutter repetitive process. But I think I'm preaching to the preacher.
No, we're in the same choir on this one.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I love it.
Kara, we've covered a lot. We're almost at the end here. I have many more than one question left, but I want to ask you this. You mentioned over 1,000 keynote presentation, we'll call them pitches, suggestions, offerings. What makes one stand out for you?
So it's interesting timing that you're asking me that question, because I'm writing some content on LinkedIn about this right now. And so there's some stuff that I'll be distributing shortly. But I think what it comes down to, and it's not a complex answer, it's how do they know how to answer the question of what would your ideal headline be, right? And that's a work in progress that is a partnership, between the two
right.
parties. I think it's really important that companies, when they are pitching for a big stage opportunity, wherever it is, whatever industry it is, that they are very grounded in why they want to do it. Not just because my competitor is doing it, or not just because everybody says it would be great, but what are you looking to do? Do you want to outline a future vision? Do you want to launch a product? Do you want to, kind of really talk about new partnerships that are going to transform the way that customers are going to interact with your company? Whatever it may be, I think coming into a pitch, being very clear about that, but also being very clear about your purpose. Why are you doing this work? So that kind of that purposeful thinking. You've created this, this business opportunity for a reason. Know the human impact of your work, know the business impact of your work. And I think one of the things that's derailed some pitches that I've heard, over the years was too much focus on, hey, we're unveiling product 2.3 part B. That's actually really exciting and really important and relevant, but perhaps not for a big stage opportunity. There's a community that really wants to know the ins and outs, and you have to find the right way to talk to them. But when you want to prep for something large that has significant amplification in your world, whatever world that is, you want to be prepared to talk about the business and the human impact that your work is having. And I think if you can answer that, then the pitch is so much more successful, because you're connecting it back to the goals of the event organizer, whatever their theme is, and all of it just starts to knit together in, this kind of beautiful line of opportunities that you can create from that. So spending a little time in advance of presenting that pitch, I think, is really important for organizations and teams to think about.
Bam. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Kara. That's a mic drop right there, ladies and gentlemen. That's the gold and the magic of this podcast. You literally are preaching to the preacher. We're in the same choir on this one. The asset of that stage, whatever size, has to be maximized and leveraged. And the human element there, while version 2.3b is important and should not be minimized or discarded, you have to find the right place. And that's the magic. And that's where the expertise of content with impact comes in. So really, really great. I'm looking forward to that article. I want to repurpose it. I want to repost it. I want to read it. and dive in and inhabit all the great info there so that I can become better myself. So, Kara, we are now at the current end of this episode because we're probably going to have you back and at some point and hear what exciting things, events, conferences that you've created and the impact that your content has had on the world. But this is now the 20 questions part. It's a little bit more lighthearted, a little bit more whimsical. The idea is it's somewhat rapid fire and mostly as short answers as possible. We call it 20 questions, but it's not literally 20 questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, here we go. Because ready or not, here we come. What's the one thing we wouldn't know about you by reading your resume?
Princess Leia was my hero growing up. And if I could inhabit the Star Wars world as her, I would be very happy with the rest of my life.
May the force be with you.
Thank you. And also with you.
Inhabit the world you will. Was there ever a time when content strategy did not go as planned?
Oh, I'm sure I could have 1,000 of examples, but yes, that always happens. The one thing you always know is that something will go wrong in an event.
What are 3 adjectives that a client would describe you as?
Collaborative, focus, and future forward.
Name a speaker you have yet to book that you would like to do so.
Tim Cook with Apple.
Good one. You're not the only one there on that one.
That's a long list of people.
What's the last book you read?
A book called The House is on Fire. I just finished it last night about a theater fire in Richmond in the 1800s.
Wow. I love history. I'm going to have to look that one up. What are you binging or watching on streaming?
So my daughter has asked me to watch the new Percy Jackson series.
It looks cool.
Just starting that so that we can talk about it.
Yeah, it looks cool. Ice cream, chocolate or vanilla?
Chocolate.
Vacation, camping or 5-star resort on the beach?
Resort on the beach.
You're not the only one on that one too. Most of our guests, if there's travel agents out there, they should be tuning in because most of our guests are ripe for a 5-star vacation on the beach.
Not a camper.
Pizza, traditional cheese only or loaded with toppings?
Toppings.
I see. What's the thing you're working on right now that most excites you?
My business.
Yeah.
Developing new clients.
Yeah.
It's awesome. It's terrifying and exhilarating all at the same time.
Yeah. It's the purest adventure there is, right? It's truly a meandering adventure. Social media, friend or foe?
Depends on the day.
And very, very good answer. I think we're going to leave it at that. Depends on the day. Today was a day of magic with Kara Dickerson, our special guest, the founder of Content with Impact. Kara, thank you so much for making time for us, for our tribe of meeting professionals, even business owners that tune in, being so thoughtful on your answers and taking the time to impart your experience and your stories with us. Just really appreciate it.
Honored to be invited to the conversation. Thank you.
Well, it's truly a pleasure. And to our audience, thank you again for coming back and listening and tuning in. For the first-time listeners, thanks for coming. Please share. Sharing is caring with your tribe, with your family, with your colleagues, with your loved ones. And from me, thank you for being an active, engaged part of our effort here to bring Keynote Curation to the world. We believe that words make a difference and a speech can change lives. So thank you all, and we'll see you next time.